So I was not designing a computer with any idea we'd ever start a company, ever have a product, ever be successful. It was just to go down to the club and show off and to own and use. I used it at work to run some calculations for the calculator chips I was designing. I'd run it right there on my desk, and I was impressing quite a few people. They would come by, engineers would come by my desk after Hewlett Packard had turned me down for doing it as a product. They'd come by and say, "This is the most incredible product I've ever seen." So they could recognize it was great, but they couldn't come up with a reasoning that Hewlett Packard could make it.
It used to be.
Okay? Used to be that computers were worth more than the people using them, and that we were slaves to doing things their ways. Now we're in control, and computers do things our ways, and they're obedient slaves to us, and we're very happy for it and lucky, and we're motivated, and our self-esteem is up. That show patterns of light, how they could use that to store information like memories. Very little information in today's terms, but I read these articles and I started picking up computer concepts, and I found it interesting at first. And later on, I got a book on Boolean algebra. And I was good at math. This was algebra, and I studied it and learned how to do calculations. And by 8th grade, built a really great science fair project. I built a few computer projects, even in elementary school, for science fairs to show off things that could, like I learned the concepts of how you would build a machine to play tic-tac-toe. And I nearly built one on a big piece of plywood with nails pounded in and transistors that a local company Fairchild gave me 400 transistors and diodes free to build a project. And I soldered all these transistors to the posts, and I didn't quite get it working, but by 8th grade I built a working computer element, an adder subtractor in binary. Built it out of transistors because this was before chips were affordable. And it was just out of interest. It wasn't like I got graded on it. I didn't have any friends that did it. I didn't do it because I had a group of computer people, did it all alone. I don't know why. I knew when I was doing it, it was like I'm solving crossword puzzles in a sense. I would dream computers and wake up with a solution in the middle of the night, and I learned after a while I might forget it, so I write them down. And it was like that all through my childhood. By the end of high school, I learned how real computers, the computers from the new company Digital, had the PDP-8. The Small Computer Handbook was one of the key manuals in those days that taught me a lot about computers. When I was in high school, I told my father that someday, back then the mini computer with 4K of RAM cost as much as a house. I told my father, I've decided that someday I'm going to have an apartment instead of a house, and I'm going to buy myself a computer. I'm going to be the one person that owns a computer in the world. And a lot of us had really made that decision. We wanted a computer, but our company owned it. We would sneak time. There was one friend that went to the Homebrew Computer Club with me, and in earlier years when we were both at a local community college, he had a key, and we'd use the key, and we'd go in at midnight, and we'd sit there for 2 hours running programs with cards on this IBM computer, and then sneak back out. You just wanted as much access as you could get to the computer, because that's how you could learn more. And we all wanted our own computers, and finally we were going to be able to have our computer, and it wasn't our company's computer, and we were going to be able to use that tool with so much of our free time. We'd be able to do more than their programmers could anyway. Kept us from having good access to them. And to a lesser extent, us versus them, we kind of saw ourselves doing a better job, but the large companies that made computers like Hewlett Packard were predicting that these small computers, they're nothing. It's a little hobbyist fad. They're going to be dinky kits sold in surplus stores. There's really nothing to this. It's like they were saying one story, and we were out there saying, this is the greatest product ever. You're going to improve homes. You're going to be able to do calculations. You're going to be able to play games. And it's here now, and it's affordable, and everybody can have one. And we thought it was the greatest thing ever, and we could see it. We could see what they could do. And these other companies didn't even talk. Their marketing people and their business people, they didn't talk the same language we did. They talked proper business language, but they had marketing terms for why the market wasn't going to be very large and evolved, but they were not the users. You could tell they didn't realize what this thing was. A couple of big inductors, this kind of world that people live in some very strange stores, not even the normal electronic stores. And their designs showed it. You'd look at their design, it would be way too many parts, way too many components, too many chips for what they did. They would use the lousier lower state of RAM chip, of memory chip, just simply because it was the one hobbyists were used to. It was available on the surplus market. It was, in stores. And I was, just by looking at their designs, I was not impressed technically with the other people designing computers. Most of the people in the club that I got to know, I had a similar opinion of, that they were not at the top technically. They just, motivations, we were alike. And so I was maybe one of the rare ones where I always designed to try to do the most excellent job. I sort of knew that in certain kinds of designs I was better than anyone else that I'd ever encountered. And I would come to the club and pull out a board that had maybe a third as many chips as another computer, maybe a fifth as many that did the same thing. And I'd show this one simple little board doing what 5 boards over there did and even more, and just amazing people. You mean you can sit down and just type on this one little board, you can type on a keyboard and see it on a TV set, and over there you have to have this huge apparatus that costs a fortune with a ton of boards, and you have to have a special monitor, not a TV set, and you don't even have a keyboard to type yet. You have to toggle some switches and push buttons. And so I was a little bit, my stuff was probably kind of impressive, but I wasn't expressive enough to even explain to most of the people what this one had the others didn't have. Thinking people were going to write these kind of games that now every Nintendo game you buy is along that style of colored characters moving around on a screen and colored pictures and all. No, I just sort of threw it in because, well, it's color, it's graphics. I don't know where it goes. I don't know what people use it for. I even argued briefly that maybe we ought to leave it out and save 3 chips. And Steve fought, no, let's put it in. We've got it. It wasn't until the game showed up that we knew what people were going to do with it. Well, it was around that time, after that first year, and all of a sudden the Apple had all these great games and the other machines didn't. Because we had a better processor, a hotter one in technical terms, it was easier. Well, we really had a hotter computer. Our computer, for a very low price, could do a lot of neat things, and that invited the software to come, the programs that did all these things, and once we had the programs behind us, there was no comparison. Well, I designed the Apple I computer, didn't have a name yet, just to show it off at the club, pass out schematics. I would go over to people's houses and help them build these things, and Steve saw the interest. He saw that there were a lot of people that were interested in getting schematics, building their own somehow, but he also he came to me and said, well, it takes a long time to wire it together, to solder wires onto all the chips and interconnect them. It takes a long time. There are people that don't want to spend that much time. If we make a PC board, then all they have to do is plug in the chips, solder them one time quickly, and everything's done. And they save a ton of work, and everything, has a better chance of working, etc. And so his idea was we start a company to sell boards. It costs us $20 to make a board. We sell it for $40. And we kind of visioned selling 50 somehow. We'd get our money back. I didn't think we'd sell 50 at our club because I'm thinking, how many people are really into the 6502 and going to buy a board for $40? I didn't think it was going to be 50. So we had to come up with schemes to handle normal dollar and cents amounts. So he said we need floating point basic. It's a language, a computer language that can handle numbers with decimal points. The other one he said was, well, it took a long time to run checkbook. You had to load a cassette tape into a cassette tape player, load it in, run it into your Apple II, and wait. You'd have to wait a minute while it loaded in and go beep, it's done. Then you'd have to load in another cassette that had all your check information and wait a minute while it read in, beep, it's done, and now you can run the program. And when you're all done with the program, you've got to write both of those tapes back out. A long, time-consuming, the biggest part of this simple task of updating a couple checks in your checkbook was waiting for the cassette tape recorder. So Mike Markowitz said we need a floppy disk because floppy disks are fast enough. And I had played around with an idea for a real clever floppy disk controller. I didn't know what they were even, but I just knew it's like magnetic tape. You have to write some signals onto a tape, normal type signals that go up and down like voice. And somehow you have to be able, when it comes back through, you have to be able to read it and figure out what was there. That's all I knew about floppy disks. But Steve got a couple floppy disks from Shugart, and I sat down with this clever idea for building one with very few parts, and I started working away, and partly in the back of my head was, what a neat excuse to go to Las Vegas, a show in Las Vegas in January 1970, 7 or 8, 1978. Well, I thought, what a great chance to go to Las Vegas and see the bright lights in the city that's in movies if I can show something off. Well, Mike, I can get a floppy disk ready to demo then. And he said, okay. And boy, it was like only a couple weeks left, and I worked every day over Christmas vacation, including Christmas, New Year's Day. Randy Wigington came in and helped write some software for me, and we got enough going. I got the hardware finished. This clever little circuit with only 5 chips did what normally 50 take, and Randy wrote some programs that wrote the data onto the disk in the right order, and we pulled out our scopes, and we got it working. We went to the show in Las Vegas, and the floppy disk meant a lot because you could store several programs on one floppy disk at a reasonable cost. You could say run checkbook, run color math, run Star Wars, run whatever, it was all there, kind of accessible, a lot of storage, fast. And that really, that plus the calculation program VisiCalc, which was good for small businesses to keep track of some of their account information. Those two alone made the Apple the sure winner in 1978. By the end of the year, we were backlogged hugely. And we knew we had a real product. And then we sort of stopped changing the floppy disk and we started thinking out a strategy for what type of floppy disk. I had basically, Shugart built into their floppy disk had about 30 chips. And I just thought, well, more efficient. I just bypassed about 20 of them. I think we wound up only using 4 of their chips. And so Steve Jobs went to Shugart and talked them into making us a cheaper version that didn't have as much on it, because they had a lot of stuff in there that you really didn't need if you implemented the floppy disk the way we did. And the product was turned out to be rather easy to take from there into production. I was so proud of my design. I sat down and I laid out the PC board myself, taping little Mylar strips. Came in every night. I was in every night till 2 to 4 in the morning. Last technicians have left. Taped it up, and it had to be so pure and have very few holes in the board. And then I figured out a way I could make it one less hole, so I scrapped everything and redid it for another week. And very seldom do you find the engineer. Normally an engineer doesn't get the chance to lay out his own board. You give it to somebody else who's paid less money, and they lay out the PC board. But one of the neat things that happens when you cross disciplines, when you do the design, but you also lay out the PC board, is you can spot that the PC board layout would be a little bit cleaner if I changed the design. See, normally the guy who's laying out a PC board can't dare change the design. It's not in his authority, his mandate. He's not allowed to do that. So that was kind of interesting, and it was neat. And a few people over the years noticed how very, very tiny and tight that board was. I don't know, it just makes you feel that you've done something yourself that's so valuable. It's motivating. It gives you a lot of energy. It makes you want to show it to people, talk about it, go on and design the next thing. You just don't run out of energy it's just a thing I'm doing, just a job. No. It's your whole life is on display. All my circuits, of even things besides Apple stuff, though, I always felt that way about. And it was like an art. I found out later on when we started Apple that there's only about 1 out of every 10 engineers that is really that superb, that just chases perfection to the nth degree. And those are the few that are like artists. And I was just one of that type. I just work for an extra 5 hours in one night to save the tiniest little bit of code in a program, figure out a way to get past it. It seemed like you were getting closer to pure perfection, closer to what God had intended. If something just sort of worked out with almost no parts, it was somehow the way nature meant the world to turn out. Well, now you had a very, I think it increased the performance level, what was demanded of a program to be a very good program. It just raised the level that a program had to perform at. Maybe because there were so many more people. If you wrote a program now, it could go to 1 million people easily if it were very good and very general. And boy, it was worth putting in all sorts of fine finished touches, making things very understandable, very forgiving. If you make a mistake, it has to be kind of gentle with you and, not rude, and it has to give you ways to escape out and give you options to try something else, suggest what you might have done. These sort of concepts, they were kind of well known among some people, but there weren't resources enough to put them into programs that were just going to be used by computer people in a computer company who will always be expected to do the right thing. So the programs had to become more personal, have some color attached to them. And this was just a greater demand on the part of the consumers. The sort of people buying computers were not technical anymore.
Why were so many people so interested?
I wouldn't say so many people were so interested in the days of the first homebrew meeting. There were only 40 of us that met in the garage. God knows why. The thing that spurred it was a cover article on Popular Electronics magazine that showed a picture of the Altair computer, kind of the first computer you could buy. It wasn't really a computer, it was a kit, meaning you had to be electronic. And there were only 40 of us, but the club, even for that type of club, technical people, you see, the only thing we had in common was we all had to be a little bit strange. We were all interested in technology or something pertaining to strange types of people, strange things going on in the world, strange diets, strange clothing, strange um, ways of doing things. You know, there were probably very few people in there that had a credit card. I don't. So it was unusual for those type of people to grow over a year to maybe 500 of us meeting every 2 weeks. But it's like we were all there, just listening to every word. A lot of us were very shy, like myself, afraid. I never raised my hand and offered something to the club. Occasionally, I'd submit an article of a clever program I'd written or something to the club journal because we wanted to pass around good things. And I would haul down my TV set from home and hook it up and show off the computer every 2 weeks, even the Apple II, showing it off while it was being developed. You never heard of a successful product being treated that way by a company because they'd be afraid, well, other people seeing it is going to stop us from being able to sell it. Well, here's a case where it obviously didn't. And a lot of people would look at it and not quite be sure that we were going to go anywhere even without the Apple II. But boy, I don't know. It's just hard. Anyone who was a part of the Homebrew Computer Club, it's the sort of thing that existed once in your life and may never exist again. Because that was the big excitement. We were hearing what companies were coming out with what products. Some people were offering to sell RAM chips at a certain low price, or talking about a new product they were working on, or some other company was going to introduce. I mean, some of it was flaky rumors and some of it was good rumors, but you love to hear it.